Tonight I was asked to speak about some of my approaches that I've used in the past. In particular, actually, the title of this event, Culture Hacking. I wrote a book in 2013 called The Heretic's Guide to Global Finance, where I used that as one of my titles for one of the chapters, where I was basically referring to the process by which you break into organizations in order to discover what goes on inside them. And to kind of explore them. And I did that with the financial sector. So that's one of the, that's what I referred to as culture hacking, was entering into the financial sector and trying to uncover these sort of rules, systems, and principles at play. Now, actually, that's a very anthropological technique. I called it culture hacking for particular reasons, but the history of anthropology as a discipline is basically the art of going into human organizations of various forms and trying to figure out how they work. I could do an anthropology of this theater right here if I wanted to, for example. In anthropology, there's a number of different traditions. You have, for example, immersive anthropology, where you basically spend a lot of time immersed with a particular group of people. But historically, that was always done with marginalized communities. So in the 1970s, a new kind of anthropology emerged, which was called upward anthropology, where basically you would start to go into powerful organizations and start to look at how the people in these organizations worked. Actually, within management theory, there's been anthropologists who hang out in organizations and try to work out, what the most efficient way of organizing is. But then there's also quite a historical trend of activist anthropology, thinking about how do you use this information for political purposes. Now, unfortunately, though, anthropology as a discipline is still constrained within academia. So, and within academia, there's constraints, right? So you can't really do overt political organizing. So my approach tended to be, I have always had an activist background, and I also had studied anthropology, so I thought I'll go and enter into the financial sector with an anthropological mentality, but I won't go as an official anthropologist. I'll actually go and work in a sort of a real sense in the sector outside of the academic discipline. And I did that for 2 years, and we can talk about the dynamics of that if you really want to talk about trading and derivatives and so on. But that was a very fascinating process to see how essentially some of the most powerful organizations in the world work, and also just how banal they are and how ordinary they are as well. Because a lot of people outside of these types of organizations always imagine them to be these kind of like, sort of devious, deviant things. And actually, if you're thinking about GCHQ and, for example, NSA, I can guarantee you that NSA is probably one of those banal places as well to actually be in there every day. It's probably really boring. It's probably a very sort of routinized way of existing in these organizations. But you only kind of get that experience if you immerse yourselves in it. I'm going to quickly, I don't have much time, do I?
You're fine, carry on.
Let me quickly, so this is a section of anthropology we could talk about, and I sometimes liken it to Gonzo Journalism. We have some investigative journalist tendencies on this panel tonight, and investigative journalism is great. What it tends to try to do is tries to uncover the truth. That's the essence of investigative journalism. Gonzo journalism tends to try, maybe uncover the truth, but maybe more try to uncover the feeling of something. That's the real essence of Gonzo journalism, is like, what does it feel like to be part of this thing? That's what, Hunter S. Thompson kind of stuff, that sort of tradition is about. So I tend to try and blend those two traditions together of investigation with this more sort of emotive Gonzo approach. Now, one quick thing on hacker culture, which I'm actually not going to have enough time to speak about. You can characterize this within the hacker frame, because essentially, to me, I've got a slightly different take on the history of hacking, which is cool. There's the official version, which is all the kind of stuff around MIT and Richard Stallman, et cetera, et cetera. There's always kind of like historical figures which are quoted in the hacker mythology. But really, hacking, the essence of hacking is essentially that in society you're surrounded by alienating infrastructures of various sorts, whether it's like the university management that you have to deal with as a student, or whether it's like this phone that I can sort of interact with this interface, but have no idea like how it works. And the whole sort of essence of hacking has always been to try to get behind the interfaces. So in the case of like product hacking, you'd be trying to like deconstruct the phone and figure out how it works. In the case of like management hacking, you'd be trying to figure out how the actual structures are working. So it's an attempt to de-alienate yourself by going behind the boundaries of things. And that's the initial exploration impulse of hacking. And you can do that with the financial sector. And then the sort of the secondary element of that is what you try to do with it, which is you can try to start to breach those structures if you go through that process. And I'd say there's two forks in the hacking culture at that point, because you get, on the one hand, this very rationalistic kind of control impulse that comes with that. So have you ever seen these like really control-obsessed hackers, which is like, I have worked out the binary code of everything, and I can like exactly control it and tell you how it works. And this is like the popular computer image of hackers, right? It's like this sort of quasi-genius who tries to sort of, has worked out everything and then can kind of like mess with it. Then there's a second, that's like straight hacking. And then there's like queer hacking, which is more, probably what I try to do, which is effectively, you locate binaries and you try to contest the duality between binaries, which is to sort of try to make things unstable. And that's a bit of a complex thing to talk about. But when I was, for example, going to the financial sector, part of the whole point of it was I was trying to contest the binary between the concept of the activist and the person who works in finance, all right, to sort of mess with that boundary of the insiders and the outsiders in these systems. So that's a tradition in hacking that we can talk about going forward.